Your preparation is super important. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on each of these different steps as we progress through the slide deck, but I just want to give you a little bit of a sense of all the steps in the process of creating your data arc. So start with the preparation, and then you've got to give some thought about a logical and natural flow, something that will make sense to your audience. And then you're going to bring your protagonists to life. And we're going to talk a little bit about who are the protagonists and what role do they play. But think about who is your hero? Who's the hero of a story? What lurks in the dark valley? What is going to be the epiphany, the bright insight that you want your heroes to act upon? And the standoff. And then you need to show them what victory is going to look like. We will get back to these in more detail, but for now, you're probably wondering, but where does AI, all the fancy tools that we have, like CoLoop's platform, where does that fit in with all of this, all of the story arc? Well, in my opinion, humble opinion, you should think of AI and applications like your LLM or your visualization tools or your analytics tools as the props. They help your heroes to achieve their quest. They are the compasses, the maps, the sails, but they are not the central characters. The numbers should anchor the trust. And the AI tools, well, they can help to achieve your results. It is your interpretation of the numbers that cuts through the fog, and the truth that comes from your data, and a clear story that will hook your audience. Now, let's start with the prep. This is the priming, the story that lights your way needs to be constructed from the very beginning. Preparation is your foundation. You need to know your data. I think that we all understand this. You need, before you walk into that boardroom or before you face a stakeholder, you need to know exactly what the data is saying. Even if you only have access to sort of patchy sales data or social media snippets, it doesn't matter what the data looks like, but you need to know it. You know it off by heart. But that story is changing these days because sometimes, especially people dealing with real-time dashboards, sometimes the data changes mid-story, and you also need to be prepared for dealing with that type of scenario. But the next thing, very important, know your audience. Who are they? What are their pain points? What are their goals? Are there any cultural nuances or internal politics that you need to be aware of? This all comes in during the preparation phase. And of course, the goals. You need to make sure that the goals that you are addressing in your delivery, in your story, align with the goals of your audience. Doesn't matter what it is. Make sure that you find out beforehand, if you can, that there's some kind of alignment. Don't try to hide any gaps in your understanding of your market or your audience or your situation. Remember that the numbers are your lighthouse, but your heroes are going to be at the helm and they will be steering the ship. You can use AI tools, of course. You can use Power BI, dashboards, your language models to make that storytelling experience more interactive, even to find or generate data and even solutions on the spot as you are delivering, but just make sure that you can anticipate those questions as much as possible, as well as the answers, because nothing worse, ask me, than walking into a meeting and getting questions that you don't know the answer to, and then using AI to conjure something and there's an hallucination or something. Okay, just be prepared. Preparation is very important. That's the point that I'm trying to make here. Now the next thing, and now I'm jumping all over the place, So before we delve into what you should do, and I'm going to go back into that arc, I just want to quickly touch on some of the no-nos, some of the things that you should try to avoid as far as possible. These are just common mistakes that I've seen made so many times in data presentations, and I just want you to make aware of it. Firstly, data dumping without a story. It is just, it looks bad. It's unprofessional. Presenting raw data or a series of charts without weaving a cohesive narrative leaves your stakeholders confused and wondering, what are you trying to say? Where's the so what in all of this? Don't use misleading or confusing stats. If you present numbers out of context or use inappropriate scales, or if some people like to cherry pick data to fit a narrative, that just erodes the trust and it misleads stakeholders. Don't overcomplicate your visuals. That can obscure the insights rather than clarify them. And then I think one of my personal favorites, and one that I'm unfortunately guilty of myself, is death by dashboard. Overloading your delivery with overly complex, cluttered dashboards packed with charts, graphs, and metrics that just overwhelms your audience, obscuring the narrative, and just getting lost in that spaghetti of charts. And this is a rookie mistake, because when you have a new dashboard and all these shiny new things, you just want to put everything on display. You think it's going to look impressive, but if it doesn't actually throw an answer out at your audience, you've missed the point. Next thing, overusing cliches and tropes. This I hear a lot, and it's a little pet hate of mine. Relying on predictable storytelling frameworks like the hero's journey. I know I'm using it right now, but don't use it in every campaign. Overuse buzzwords like game changer, disruptor. They just feel unoriginal. Just avoid them. Rather craft authentic narratives that ties back to the specific data that you're presenting and the audience's context. And then lack of audience focus, failing to tailor your narrative to the stakeholders' priorities, their needs, their goals, their knowledge level as well. Sometimes it just goes over their head and then it's lost. Or their decision-making needs. Sometimes you're talking to people and they don't have the power to make the decision based on the data. Then you've missed something there. You need to understand your audience's goals and frame the data to address their specific concerns and opportunities, to have a really effective story. And then another common mistake is ignoring the emotional connection. If you focus on the numbers mainly, but you're not linking the data to some human impact, or a business outcome, then it fails to engage the stakeholders on an emotional level. So use relatable examples, use analogies, use real world implications, use the voice of the customer to make your data resonate with your heroes, the people that are supposed to take the action. Okay, let's get back to our flow, our arc. So thinking about your story flow, your story needs to feel natural. It needs to, that flow needs to make logical sense. And a simple flow should at least explain these 4 things. Firstly, context, your challenge that you're facing, the solution that you are trying to offer, and the impact that that solution is going to have or should be having. You frame your context, and it could be anything. It could be seasonal, and it could be anything. It could be seasonal. The context, what has given rise to the data that you're presenting. And then illuminate the challenge. Maybe you have incomplete data, and this kicks off the quest for clarity. And then you offer the solution. And the solution usually involves some intervention with AI tools. AI comes to the rescue by generating maybe synthetic data to fill the gap, or you do a pilot study with CoLoop. And this moves your heroes forward. This takes them away from the what's missing towards what's possible. And then imagine the impact. You should be, well, always realistic, and it should be tangible. It should be like sales increase or brand trust gains, but try to help your audience to envision what the impact is going to be of the solution that you are proposing in your research. Okay, so moving forward, because we've got quite a few slides to go through. Next are the people, the protagonists. Let's double click on that. They are the individuals that drive your story. They are the relevant teams internally. They are your stakeholders, the executives, the managers, but they're also external players. They include your competition and, most importantly, your customers, your clients. And you have to answer, who are the protagonists and what role are they going to play in your data story, in your data narrative? Who is the hero in your story? The hero is always the person who will face the challenge and take the action. These are executives, the strategists, the brand leaders, the decision makers, influencers. You, of course, play a very important role. You are the data storyteller, and you are central as an influencer in the scenario, but you want to guide, and you want to direct, and you want to inspire action. You are not the hero, and always remember that. Make your hero central to the story. Tell them you shape the future. And we're going to get back to this whole thing of handing over this hero role to your audience. But another couple of caveats. Try not to patronize your audience with fancy buzzwords. Respect their intelligence. I know most of you are planning to use some sort of AI tool in your delivery, but use it as a tool and only as a tool. It's a compass, like spotting trends in sparse data. Don't make the tool the hero, because that will just alienate your decision makers and make them feel like they're redundant in your story, which will probably have the opposite effect of what you're wanting to achieve, and that is for them to take an action. They'll just feel like, okay, you've already got a tool to make decisions for us. So don't make the tool the focus. Focus on the heroes. Numbers build trust, but they are only there for guiding your actions, the actions of the hero forward. Okay. The dark valley. I like this one. The dark valley represents a low point or a root cause of a challenge or a threat to your business. It is the part of the story where, you know, that old sailor says, "There be dragons." Everyone's afraid of the dark valley. Everybody is aware of the dragon. Now think for yourself. What is your hero's dark valley? What is your stakeholder's dark valley? It could be anything. It could be insufficient data. It could be budget cuts. Anything that feels like navigating through a thick fog. Don't try to dodge the valley. You have to take your audience through that valley, but rather let the truth cut through that fog. You need to always state very clearly the what is. You need to say, we're missing trends. Be honest. And once you've crossed that hurdle, then comes the epiphany. And there comes the epiphany. Could be as simple as your AI tools being used for triangulating data using Power BI to bridge sales data and CoLoop sentiment analysis, showing some sort of niche product demand spike or something. There is always a recommendation where you have had a bright moment of clarity that gives you a solution. Well, not always, but usually it does. And what you do when you bring in that epiphany into your story after you've explained the dark valley is that you cut through the fluff. You stop relying on fuzziness and speculation, and instead you are directing outcomes using numbers. And numbers are safe and numbers are unambiguous. So in your story narrative, you will say, here's what we know. Here's how we can solve it. And you leave it up to your hero to see the progress and the next steps. Okay, next, standoff. The standoff is not typical of all data stories and narratives, but it's a very nice thing to weave into things. And I'm going to have to speed things up a little bit. The standoff is part of the story where you lay out a hypothetical strategy for overcoming your hero's challenge. Now, remember, in the data story, where your stakeholders are the heroes, you want to put the ball in their court. And you want to ask them, how would you approach this from the perspective of that challenge? Is it your gut-driven executive? Is it your lack of evidence? You look at it from that perspective. If you've got a gut-driven executive, I think you've all met that kind of guy that they are skeptical of the numbers, and then they tend to shoot down ideas the moment they are pitched. You need to anticipate any feedback from your audience, and then you need to be ready to counter that pushback and stand your ground. So when an executive says something like, I know the customers, and the customers don't find that type of product appealing, you could bring your AI dashboard and you can show a projected revenue potential for instance, a simulated pilot product line. It may not be solid proof, but I have seen this many, many times. Gut-driven leaders find it very difficult to punch holes in mathematical models. So if you have numbers to back up your arguments, you can take on those tough guys in your presentation. So that basically is like your standoff and your victory means that you're going to have to lay out the strategy, and you're going to anticipate the feedback, you're going to anticipate the pushback, and you're going to have an answer for each one of those scenarios. Then, next one is the call to action. So let's come back to your audience and why it is such a good idea to make them the hero in your data-driven journey. The heroes hold the decision-making power, and they probably also hold the budget to take the next steps. Your task is very clear. It is to frame their role with your storytelling language. You want to tell them the how. You're going to tell them, you do this by using your power. This is your opportunity to turn this data into action. When the data may be incomplete, you might direct them to wield more tools to fill in gaps, but Whatever you do, you use your narrative to get them to act. And I'm going to explain how to do this in 3 simple steps. And the first step is step up to the challenge and seize the power. Your audience, whether they are insights professionals, brand executives, or product developers, they are actually the ones who have the power to shape consumer strategies. Make them own that responsibility. Remind them that your decisions drive growth. Link the numbers to the roles who need to act on it. As an example, say the CoLoop study has shown that 42% of subjects responded very positively to this specific new product idea. You choose the path how to bring this to the market. Once again, avoid the jargon, be direct. In all my years, I have repeatedly seen that this direct approach works globally across across your hero feel and act like they are the leaders. Step 2, invite your audience to lead the crusade. It's another reason why you need to know your audience so well. Choose the right carrots for the right donkeys. There are many different ways in which you can frame your call to action. You might start by breaking the ice with something like, we're going to use this new AI tool to turn our old data into future impacts. But we need you to lead the way before launching into your recommendations. But, gut-driven executives, skeptics in the room, they'll counter that sometimes, and you need to know how to play to their needs. And usually it's something as simple as saying, you have the ears of the organization. You can shift mindsets. Yeah, well, I'm not going to go too much into detail there, but only you can picture that personality type, and it's all about image for them, and they know that they're not going to convince anybody with numbers, but they can convince people with charisma. It's your job to convince them with the numbers, and it's their job to take it further from there. Okay, step 3, hand them the torch. You cannot be vague about this. When you reach this part of your data story, it has to be absolutely waterproof. Suggest concrete and realistic actions. Something like use CoLoop or another tool to triangulate what we know with what we can find out to fill these gaps and to clarify the uncertainties. And then be very specific. You need to say things like, you need to run at least 2 pilots to prove the value of this proposition, but tell only truth. If the truth eludes you, also be honest about that. And for unpopular data, and that was the top thing that you're all facing, is that the data is telling something that your stakeholders don't want to hear. You need to frame setbacks as opportunities, but only if you can back it up with numbers, because, as I said, numbers don't lie. Let's briefly recap this hero formula. So, invite them to join the crusade, or inspire them to start their own crusade. Remind them of their power and their responsibility to wield their powers that have been entrusted to them. And then hand them the torch. Put the tools in their hands. It could be any of a variety of AI props and tools, dashboards, analysis tools, but put put the flame, put the torch in their hands and let them lead the way forward. The numbers will anchor the trust will drive their actions, and clear stories win crusades. Now, yeah, coming to a conclusion here, because I see we've got just enough time for a few questions yet. Data storytelling makes the truth shine through the foggy soup of numbers and statistics. And activation can only really gain momentum once you have cleared that fog, that incomprehensible or incomplete data. That's fog. And your gut-driven executives, they absolutely hate anything that looks like fog. And they will try to find their own way around it. But you need to show them the way. You need to show them how to get through it so that they don't follow their gut on another route. You need to be that beacon, using your toolbox of AI applications and tools to guide your heroes with clear, unambiguous numbers and real-time truth. That's the beauty of AI. So, okay. No time for the Philips data story, but maybe I can cover that in the Q&A. But yes, I'm going to just jump straight to the questions. I think 10 minutes just about enough. But firstly, thank you all for tuning in today and for listening to this session. I feel it was a real privilege for me to have this opportunity to share my storytelling ideas, and I hope you enjoyed it and found it engaging and enlightening. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that follow. And I think maybe with that, I should pop over to the Zoom window. Where's the Q&A? Oh, okay. One question. How, if at all, would we think differently about this in a qualitative research work? Okay, now, very good question. Thank you very much, Jody, for sharing that question. The number of AI applications that are currently becoming available for qualitative research it's exponential. And when you deliver qual research, you do it in a very different way than when you do it for quant research. And one of the key things that we found with qual research at Philips, for instance, for our personas. Personas there was a massive qualitative research project, really in depth, going into healthcare professionals, and we developed these beautiful broad spectrum views of the pain points and the challenges of our key segments and key target markets. And we used a very different type of storytelling technique, and that was called knowledge zones, where the delivery of the results were not a presentation like you would traditionally do, but it was part of our knowledge management platform, where our subject matter experts created very detailed stories about each persona on a website-like platform that was interactive, that had a lot of rich media. It had voice, it had video, it had interactive segments. And so when it comes to qualitative and quantitative, there are different ways of delivering stories. Sometimes it all goes into one single deliverable where you have a slide deck and you can show it to your stakeholders. And other times it's more of an episodic series of deliverables where you touch on intricate details in great depth at different levels as the need arises. So and there are some great AI tools And the knowledge platform that we used is a great example of how you can have this different mode of delivery for transferring qualitative results. Yep, I do. So yes, as I said, so from the perspective of quali, quant, from a qual perspective, yes, there is a huge difference in the way that you want to present data. And I did mention that dashboards, for instance, dashboards are typical quantitative tools, and they are becoming hugely interactive. But with our personas and with some of the other qualitative research that we've done, we have also built interactive platforms where you could pose questions to subject matter experts and to the people that actually did the research on the platform and get very quick answers. But more importantly, we used large language models, ChatGPT style question bots that could analyze vast amounts of qualitative feedback, and then structure really, really accurate and detailed responses to individual questions in our knowledge platform. I hope that answered the question from Susanna.
I have a question, if that's all
Sure.
right. We did a lot of what was another question? We spoke to a lot of in-house enterprise teams around this very problem of them feeling ineffective in their role because people weren't listening. How do you, so for example, we spoke to people at Disney and people at different companies, and the basic thing was the problem that you are addressing in this thing, which is we're presenting and then I see the action and it's clear they've not listened. Do you have any experience in how you begin to have that conversation with execs or stakeholders who are repeatedly, you're showing them information and maybe they're bought in the meeting, but then 6 months down the line, you see the advertising campaign and you're like, well, clearly you've not actioned anything. How do you have that, like, a diplomatic conversation to be like, hey, why aren't you listening?
I found, well, actually, I've got a couple of examples that I can think of where not myself, but other presenters, some of my colleagues, actually addressed people in the room and said very directly, this presentation is not for you. And she did that to the CEO of the company. And she was very honest about it. And she said, Mr. CEO, I'm not going to name names here, but he said, I know your responsibility is towards the board of executives and to the shareholders. Your responsibility is not to fix this campaign. So I'm going to pretend that you're not in the room, and I'm going to tell it straight to the people that can make a difference. Well, the people that do or did have in that situation the responsibility to act on that data, they looked at the CEO and the CEO looked at them, and the CEO just nodded, and they knew they need to listen because she put the CEO on the spot. She clarified that his responsibility is not to take action on this data, but acknowledged that he is there, that he is taking an interest, and then passed on that sort of responsibility, from bounced it off the CEO onto the people that were actually responsible. And that was a very effective. I'm not saying that that's going to work in every situation, not always. Sometimes you only have the stakeholders in the room that need to be listening to the message, and then they still don't listen. And in that case, you might have to change your narrative. You need to stop delivering the way that they used to things being delivered and maybe change things up a little bit. What I've also seen is that people brought actual customers, actual consumers, actual clients into a meeting and said, I'm going to introduce you to this customer. This customer has a problem with our product. You need to listen to what this customer has to say. So there are different ways where you can actually make people listen and sit up because, well, they've fallen into comfort zones and they get a little bit too relaxed with the status quo, or they don't want to rock the boat. But there are ways that you can, tweak your presentation style and bring in other types of props that can get their attention.
Very nice, very nice. Just a small follow-up on that. Are you, because that's really interesting, especially around the getting a customer in. Are there any other like, I guess, unusual or non-standard techniques that you've seen work well, where you can just like cut through the noise and get the attention of people? Because especially in like this post-COVID era, where a lot of the time the presentations are just faceless, cameras off, and you can't really see anything.
It's tough. Yes. Now that we are in a digital era where everything becomes automatically anonymized for privacy and for GDPR reasons, and there is so much richness that gets lost in that process of anonymizing everything. But at the same time, there is so much fluff getting generated by AI. When you're analyzing, for instance, social media content, you don't know whether you're analyzing sometimes bot answering or real people answering. And especially when you're looking at ratings and reviews, we had huge problems distinguishing between what are actual consumers and what are artificially generated responses. So yeah, that is a tough one. And I think as an industry, we need to look at methods of keeping ourselves honest, keeping our customers, our clients honest, and overcoming some of the new challenges that are being presented in this digital era, because it's only going to accelerate and it's going to become a little bit more complicated for us to hear real voices, real human narratives shine through in the white noise of all this, what is digitally created.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. All right, we'll leave it there unless there are any other last-minute questions, as we're nearly at time. But just wanted to say thank you to everyone that has come, and we're going to be putting this on demand on the community. So just feel free to both share it with other people and to watch again. And we're going to be having another session next week, Thursday. So check out our community. If you want to continue the conversation, check out what else we've got coming up on the calendar. And yeah, another huge thank you to Tom for his time. And yeah, thank you again.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, see you
Have a great
later.
evening. Have a great day. Bye.